Well, I think we'll maybe make a start, folks. You're all very welcome to this evening's webinar. We're absolutely delighted to be hosting this evening. And this wasn't in our diary a few weeks ago because we didn't know that Philippa McIntosh, our guest tonight, would be very successful in her BT Young Scientist research. And you probably saw the coverage of that in the last few days. And it's just really delighted to be able to mark the great success that Philippa had with this evening's webinar. Shortly, we'll be passing over to Philippa to talk about her research, and there'll be opportunities if people want to ask questions. There's the Q&A there if people want to ask questions, and happy to take questions, and then we can pass those over to Philippa after her presentation. But before we do, we're also delighted to be joined by Senator Tim Lombard, who has been a great supporter of Dyslexia Association of Ireland and dyslexia rights for the last few years. And I really would like to just maybe pass over to Tim just to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Donald. Look, it's a wonderful opportunity we have here tonight to really see one of our ambassadors when it comes to dyslexic rights. We've been talking about this issue about wordy maths and how it really affects people and how people need to actually have the actual education platform put right so people actually can work through their maths questions. On the 11th of January, when I went to the RDS and I saw this project, I was blown away by it. And the amount of people I met who spoke about it was just unbelievable. I spent 5.5 hours in the BT Young Scientist, and it was coming up every second time about this project. And this project, actually proved what we've been talking about for so long, Donald, about how we need to have the education system that's fit for purpose, and how if you put things in the appropriate way, dyslexic people have the ability to actually do really, really well. And I was just amazed by how she compared it to the GSEs in the UK. It really worked at every single level. And I think from my point of view, I was blown away by it. I contacted Rosie straight away actually to tell her what a project this was. So it's great that, number one, Philippa got the recognition that she deserved. I think the honour that she got as a young scientist comes down to her hard work and innovation, and I think that really has to be acknowledged. And now we've the wonderful opportunity to actually hear the project in detail and to go through it. And I think this is it's a catalyst for change. It really is, wonderful project that points out exactly what needs to be done. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm only a passenger here to listen, here to learn. And, I had the opportunity to meet Philippa and her family this week in my office in Bandon, and I'm just blown away by the excitement we have with this wonderful project.
Thank you very much, Tim. I think your enthusiasm is shared by a lot of people who have read Philippa's research. And actually, I've just put a link in the chat for people joining this evening that will take you to our news page where we have a link to Philippa's research. So if you wanted to browse that as Philippa's talking, or you may want to check it out after this evening, or indeed forward that to colleagues or to family members or to people that you also think may be interested. Because we're recording this evening, we'll also be able to make this recording available to people who may not be able to join. I know loads of people are interested in the event. We had over 100 people signing up, but as you know, sometimes people can't attend live, so we can make that available to them afterwards. Anyway, enough of my yapping, as they say. I'd love to just now hand over to Philippa to just talk you through her research, and then we can, as I said, we'll take some questions after she's concluded her presentation. Philippa, over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And I should be sharing my screen there.
That looks great.
Perfect. So the title of my project was Beyond Numbers, Textual Challenge of Junior Cycle Maths for Dyslexic Students. So I got the idea for my project because I have dyslexia, and I sat my junior cert high-level maths exam last year. And in the exam, I really struggled with the phrasing and the wording of the questions. I knew that I understood the maths, but I didn't even understand what was being asked of me in that exam hall. And so after the exam, I sat down with my maths teacher, and she went through the questions with me, but she expressed them in far simpler terms. And so what I found was that once it was just the pure raw maths itself, I understood exactly what to do. So that's what this project explored. So are dyslexic students at a disadvantage in the junior cert high-level maths exam? So I begun by using readability formulas. Essentially, how they work is they'll tell you how hard something is to read using all different methods. So I use the four most reliable readability formulas. They're commonly used in America to determine how hard something is to read. And so what I found is I graphed all the junior cert high-level maths papers since 2005 through these readability formulas. And so what I found was that since the introduction of Project Maths in 2014 to 2015, so you can see it here, my mouse is hovering above it, the readability of the papers, so how hard they are to read, has doubled. So obviously that's not good for anyone. So Project Maths, in theory, is a brilliant idea. It was introduced to the curriculum as a way of allowing students to visualize better what they're being asked to do using real life examples. So say Johnny ate 5 apples, he sold 3. How many does he have left? So yeah, clearly it's a really good idea. Maybe it wasn't executed as well as it could have been. So the next thing I did was I looked at the GCSE exams. So what they are is the UK equivalent of the junior certificate exams. And so I compared the readability using those same readability formulas over the past 5 years on average to the junior cert. And so if you look down here where my mouse is, you can see that, I mean, over the past 5 years on average, so this wasn't just the one paper, the junior cert was double the readability. So the GCSEs level the playing field far better than the junior cert. And like, you just have to look at that graph to understand that. And so then I just compared the 2022 paper alone using 3 readability formulas, and consistently across the board, the GCSE just scores so much lower than the junior cert. So again, significantly easier to read. And so I didn't graph this, but I did take a look at passive sentences. So what passive sentences are is basically they're not using traditional sentence structure. So an example of a passive sentence would be the bone was eaten by the dog instead of the dog ate the bone. So numerous studies have been conducted specifically on the impact of these sentences on dyslexic students. And what they found was that dyslexic students do find it significantly harder to read through these passive sentences. So I then looked at just the 2023 paper alone, and I found that 19 passive sentences were used. So that's quite alarming, especially considering that it will take a dyslexic student far longer to read through these passive sentences. So the final thing that I did was I created a test. So the test was no more than 3 questions, and the maths was really, really basic. So no more than basic multiplication, division, etc. But the wording of the questions was phrased really similarly to recent junior cert papers. So since the introduction of Project Maths. And so I used real life examples in these questions. So I gave this test out to 112 students, and they were given a script which basically explained what they were to do, and they were just given the option to pull out if they didn't feel comfortable with it. Obviously, these were completely anonymous. Students were told explicitly not to write their name on them, but in the end, 12 tests had to be destroyed because students wrote their names on them. So I was left with around total of 100 tests. And so I just graphed the results and I corrected all the tests. And so students were asked for their sex, if they'd been diagnosed with dyslexia, and they were asked to time themselves taking the test. So I captured all this data and I used these 2 graphs here that just illustrate really simply what I found. So as you can see, the total time taken for a dyslexic student was double that of a non-dyslexic student. I mean, they just clearly really struggled with like the wording of the questions. And again, the overall accuracy, even though the dyslexic students took longer, was around 30% lower. So no matter how much time they took, they were still getting questions wrong. And obviously the maths wasn't the problem because they were created to be really, really simple maths, but they just didn't understand what they were being asked to do. So I had the similar problem in my junior cert exam. And so the final thing I did was I ran a t-test and a u-test. So what these are, they're basically a way of saying something about an entire population with only your sample. So my sample being the 100 students that I tested, and the overall population being the overall population, so all secondary school students. And so in short, I can say with 95% confidence that if I were to carry out this same test across the entire country, I'd have the exact same results. And then in conclusion, dyslexic students are at a significant disadvantage in the junior cert, especially since Project Maths was introduced. I also found that the UK is clearly doing something right because their papers are far easier to read. So they're ahead of us in that aspect where they have leveled the playing field. And obviously, they're at a complete disadvantage because, as I've proven, they just take way longer to read these long-winded questions. And even though they take longer, they're just far less accurate. So what I would recommend for anyone really who's writing these exams is to simplify the language in the questions. Make it similar to the UK. There's no need to make an English exam in maths. I'd say definitely to provide specialized support and resources. So maybe definitely give extra time to dyslexic students because they did take double as long to read through these questions. And extra time is just kind of the main thing. Language should begin to align with current government policies. So recently, the HSC has just implemented guidelines in medical articles that have been written. So they can't be above a certain readability to make them more accessible to the general public. But clearly these don't exist in the junior cert, and I think they should. And obviously, further investigation should definitely be carried out. But what I'm thinking is that I've only looked at the junior cert here. So imagine what it's like in the leaving cert. And obviously, the leaving cert has a far more, has a far greater impact. And especially if a student performs poorly in maths at a leaving cert level, they could be discouraged from careers that they could go into, such as STEM, where, it's such a foundation level of careers in STEM that maybe they might believe that they're bad at maths when they're really not. They just are at a complete disadvantage. So yeah, that was kind of majority of my findings. And obviously I would love to look at this on a larger scale, but I am just a 16-year-old student, so I had to take my time into consideration. But yeah, that was my project.
Philippa, that was marvelous. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
No bother.
I have sat through hours and hours and hours of lectures in psychology classes, in educational psychology, master's classes, and teacher training. And I think in 15 minutes there, you put together a very compelling, very well explained, very thorough, very sound piece of research. And I think you pulled that together so slickly. I think a lot of adults joining the session today would be terrified delivering a presentation in a public forum like this, frankly. You seem to do it without a bead of sweat on your brow, so it's very impressive. Now,
Thanks.
folks, if you want to ask questions, do pop them into the chat or pop your hand up. I see there is a hand up at the moment. I wonder if I might just kick us off just by asking a couple of questions. Tell me, I'm more interested in the celebrity angle here just initially. How did it feel when you found out you had won?
Oh my God. So they do, I don't know if you're familiar with how it works, but so they announced the category prizes first, and I was gutted because I had loads of judges come up to me on the day and they announced the category prizes and I didn't win any. I was like, oh, that's not good. And then they announced the Department of Education prize. I was like, oh, maybe I have a chance. Oh my God, I didn't. And then they announced me for the overall runner-up. I was in disbelief. I couldn't even stand up. I was holding the banister, what? Because obviously, I saw the level of competition, and I mean, some of the projects were just absolutely unbelievable. So even to be there was an accomplishment in itself, but then to win such a prestigious prize against such tough competition was absolutely unreal.
And you're experiencing a bit of celebrity status, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the school's been great in terms of like, like getting me to present my project and everything. And even people like recognizing me on the street and stuff like, are you that young scientist girl? And I'm like, yeah, that's that's me.
I was joking with Philippa earlier before we started, saying that, it's an ex-pupil of the school that Philippa attends at Bandon Grammar, of course, is Graham Norton. So it might be a matter of time just before you're on the red couch with, the movers and shakers. I know, Tim, any questions or any observations you'd like to make about the research or in what your experience has been in this sort of area? Maybe you've spoken to other constituents who have had similar issues with some of the exam papers.
Yeah, Philippa mentioned the issue about extra time. I think that is something that we've been all talking about for so long. And I think it just proves the point about if we have extra time, what people can achieve. And I think when you go to third level in particular, that actual accommodation is there. But unfortunately, when it comes to your junior cert and leaving cert, we don't have that accommodation sorted out yet. So I think this piece of research really backs up something that we've been talking about for so long, that extra time can do so much for people when it comes to dyslexic and comes to the actual exams itself. But no, it's just a fantastic piece of research. It was so basic, it just compared like with like, and it actually proved something that we've been trying to prove for an awful long time. And it took Philippa to come along with this wonderful project to actually get it across the line. But like, it's up to people like myself and Donald now to get heads together and do some damage to make sure we actually get some movement on this. But it's the extra time piece. But as a celebrity, absolutely. Do you know what? Kinsale Bandon, we have a new star without a shadow of a doubt. No, no point saying we don't. So yeah, it's great. It's great for the entire locality. Actually, it's wonderful. Really is.
And it's really interesting, the issue of extra time, because we, just looking at our own petition that we started last May, it chimes very much with one of your recommendations about adding that extra time. 28,000 people have signed that petition, which is mind-blowing. So I think we really do need to hopefully see some traction in that area, because that graph that you provide is so stark, isn't it? Almost double the amount of time. And a very simple kind of scientific experimental design you have there, but it's very, very stark. You also gave me slight traumatic flashbacks to running T-tests at university when I was a psychologist. And I tell you this, Philip, if you can do a T-test, you ain't got any difficulties with maths. Do you know, that's a sign. That's third level. That blows a lot of people's minds when they are way beyond their junior cycle exams. And so if you can do that, it shows that this is not somebody who should be, given every opportunity to excel. We have a question, a hand up there from someone joining. I will, Gail, you were asking a question there. I'm just going to ask you. I think you should be able to talk now if you unmute. You could ask your question. No, maybe that was asked in error. So I can go to another person just in a second there. Carmel, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm the mother of two dyslexic students, one who's just about to do junior cert. And this is just like a revelation because my two kids are just struggling with the whole way maths is done now with the project maths. My youngest in particular struggles with language. He's quite good at maths, but just doesn't understand the question. Just goes, I can't read the question, first of all, because some of the words are really large. They're not words that you normally use. Even names confuse everything. Just so by the time they get the question wrong because they don't understand the question. So I just think this is amazing. I just hope something can be done. Also extra time. Yeah, everything is just to see the stress and the struggle at maths and the way it's being taught at the moment to dyslexic students is it's sort of unbearable to watch sometimes, and they have to do it for leaving, so it just never ends. It's an ongoing thing. That's all I'd like to say.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Carmel. Philip, is that your experience when you were sitting the paper yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, even like the negative stigma kind of surrounding it, that maybe a dyslexic person might think that they're stupid or they're slow or they're just bad at maths when they're just not. And it's so unfair that they should be subjected to that when they're just at a disadvantage, simple as.
Very good. Gail, just going to give you another chance there. It might be you're difficult with your microphone if you wanted to ask your question. No? Okay. We'll come back to you if that might just be a microphone issue there. Philippa, can I ask you, what do you, I mean, you've obviously got clear recommendations there, and we did, oh, I should have said at the start, we did invite the Minister for Education and the Junior Minister for Inclusive Education, Minister for Disability. Got lots of very positive replies. Unfortunately, couldn't attend this evening, but lots of people sharing the fact that they would look forward to watching the recording and, you know, wanted to pass on congratulations. If you did have the ear of people that could have that change, what would be their most compelling argument, do you think? I mean, what's your kind of, what would you say to them if you're sitting down with someone who had that ability to make those changes?
I mean, like 1 in 10 people are diagnosed with dyslexia, which equates to thousands of students who are going to be sitting this exam every single year. So why are so many kids going to be subjected to a disadvantage? And why hasn't this changed sooner? Like as a 16-year-old student, I'm not exactly the most powerful person who could be doing these things, but I'm like, why has someone not done anything about this sooner? Like there's such a huge amount of dyslexic students, so I do believe that definitely as soon as possible this should be investigated further on a larger scale.
I couldn't agree more. Very compelling argument. We have a few comments coming in. I feel like a radio DJ at this point. A few texts coming in. One comment is, wow, very impressive presentation, eloquent and informative. Another commenter I just want to say thank you to Philippa for taking on this project and doing it so amazingly. Extra time certainly would help in exam situations, but the readability of questions has to be addressed as well. My dyslexic 13-year-old daughter has always struggled with the readability of maths questions. And as I think you said before, you know, it's not an English exam, it's a maths exam, right?
Yeah, like we do have a separate exam, and the point I've raised like to so many people is that we have leveled the playing field in English in an aspect where, you know, grammar and spelling isn't taken into account. So I would be given, basically, I'm at the same advantage as the non-dyslexic kid next to me, but I can't say the same for maths whatsoever.
That's a really logical point, I think. In fairness, you just nailed it there. You're given a waiver. You can get your spelling and grammar waiver in the English exam. And, you know, that's really, really important. When it comes to this issue itself, there's been no accommodations made of any nature, you know. And I think the text needs to be looked at, but also the other real issue of the time. Like if we got the extra 10% time or the extra 10 minutes on the hour, which you get in third level, that would solve an awful lot of these issues. And I think the petition that the Dyslexic Association are doing, like that's really important. Like figures go up to 28,000 now. That shows you the actual groundswell of support behind this one. And I think Pepe just proved it. Fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Tim. Okay, this was intended to be a short webinar, as we said, but if any other questions or anyone wants to pop their hand up, feel free to pop them into the chat. Philippa, what is next? So obviously you're in transition year at the moment.
Yeah.
So quite a different year from last year and quite different maybe for the next 2 years. Do you have any thoughts about after school, if it's science that you might be attracted to?
Well, again, like I would, when I was younger, I really, really wanted to go into STEM, but like as I've already said, I'm kind of discouraged from that now because I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough to go into a career in STEM when I'm like, wait, I actually am. My maths results just don't reflect my maths ability. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know what I want to do now.
And it's about that time probably in TY where it's thinking about leaving certificate options and things as well. So it would be nice to think that you had free choice as to what you were interested in and what you were good at without having to think about what you might succeed at because of dyslexia in this day and age, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like even discouraged from doing higher level maths for the leaving cert now. you know, and I shouldn't be, but that's just kind of how it is. And even when I was up at the Young Scientist, actually, a lot of teachers from other subjects came up to me and told me I've had loads of dyslexic students switch subjects because they don't feel comfortable with answering these long-winded questions.
And I know we've had contact from, I think you might have had contact as well from some maths teachers who have been raising this as an issue. I think you might be even speaking to some maths teachers in the near future about your research and about your recommendations, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to be attending the IMTA in Maynooth. So that's the national kind of Maths Teachers Association meeting on the 28th of February. So I've been invited to speak at that.
And will that be a bit like the Oscars? There'll be a red carpet and you'll be asked whose dress you're wearing and things like that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Here it's pretty slick affair, right? It just shows you. I mean, I just think there's so much interest in this type of research. It's very compelling. It's very hopefully very impactful. And I know certainly that we have a massive amount of interest, both in you and your success, but also in making sure that we don't forget about this, that this doesn't go somewhere. And certainly at the association, we're very keen to make sure that this, along with other compelling arguments, mean that we can advocate significantly and advocate successfully to make the changes that truly do level the playing field. We have made some advances. We have a suite of accommodations, but we don't have everything we need to truly level the playing field. Folks, I don't see any other questions coming in at the moment, so I just wanted to say thank you very much to you for joining. And also massive thanks for Tim for giving up his time to coming along and joining the event as well. And of course, the star of the show, to Philippa for her wonderful research, and really look forward to taking this recording and making sure we send it on to the relevant elected officials, elected members and the officials, for example, in the State Exam Commission, and anyone who is showing an interest in this area. And I would probably say watch this space in two ways. Watch this space in terms of advocacy, in terms of making changes, and watch this space in terms of the next female president of Ireland is probably going to be the person in the box above me.
Yeah.
And we would not be surprised. I would only say, remember Tim and I, and get us tickets for stuff if there's something going on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
With the old dudes in the corner, do you know? Folks, thank you very much for joining. Thank you so much, Philippa, for your wonderful research and for taking the time to do it. It's so slick, so impressive. Thanks again to Tim, and thank you to everyone for joining the webinar this evening.
Okay.
All the very best. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Good. Well done. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.